some of the places that people decide to put their septic systems just blow my mind. Today we have an interesting one where somebody went ahead and built a large screened-in porch over top of the tank, and I want to take you with me while we go ahead and figure out, is it working, what's broken, and hopefully that porch never damaged the system. So let's go ahead and look outside and see what we're working with. So as we look around, we can see we have our walls, our screened-in porch. This is going to be the lid for the septic system. So it's going to be a little bit of a pain to get that off because it looks like the only way to get it out is to pry it up on the edges because somebody didn't put a handle, I guess for aesthetic choices. Getting lids off that are made of flagstone are really annoying just because usually they chip pretty easily and you have to be careful not to damage it because then people can get really fussy with you. So I usually recommend, if you're going to put some kind of flagstone under there, you can see how they have those little wooden blocks. Basically you can use that to help pry up the lid, and it gives it to where you have a little bit more space to where, like, if you can't get your hand under there or get the hook underneath, usually you can take that little wooden block out and then you'll have an extra ½ an inch worth of space to fit whatever you got to fit in there to get the lid up. Most of these lids don't weigh that much, so really it's just a factor of getting something underneath of it to pop it up enough to where you can grab it or get a larger hook to pull it up. Most of this video, we're probably going to be hanging out in the van because we are right next to a major interstate and it is so loud out back. As we go back there, you might hear what I'm talking about, but I'm going to try and record when it's not as loud. But it is the middle of rush hour in the morning, so it is what it is. So the next step, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and pop off that lid. Now, the concern with building a fixed structure around your septic system is that you're more likely to run into some problems whenever you have to repair something, right? Let's just say that the pipe between the home and the tank, let's say it collapses. You're not going to fit an excavator in there without destroying basically that entire porch, right? And I'm talking roof, walls, etc. So it makes it way more expensive to fix the problem, but it also makes it where you're destroying part of the property, and more than likely, I'm not a realtor, but more than likely you're ruining the value of the home. So I always recommend don't put that stuff on top of your septic system, right? This one unfortunately had it on the permit. I'm not sure what the county was thinking, but I don't know. The county said, hey, it's underneath the deck or underneath the porch. Good luck. And here we are. So we're gonna pop open that lid, look inside, and see what we find. So I'll see you in a few seconds. We can see here that we have most of it up. We have our first layer, which is the flagstone, and somebody put this nice, thick, heavy piece of metal underneath. But now we got to deal with all of this shenanigans. So we're gonna get the shovel, pop all that stuff off, see if we can find any additional lids, and hopefully no shenanigans underneath of this. Now finally we have the last of the lids off, thank goodness. So basically what we were working with, we had flagstone, metal, burlap sack, a little bit of concrete to our terracotta pipe. So now we're going to grab the flashlight, take a look inside, and see what's going on. After popping those lids open and looking inside the tank with the mirror, we can see we've got a little bit of root intrusion. Not the end of the world, but definitely not what we want to see, because in the position that this tank is in, it's going to be really, really difficult to remove those roots. Now there are some bushes on the back end of that wall, so more than likely those are where the roots are coming from. I say this all the time, stop planting things over your septic system, right? You're just asking for roots to get in there. Now, what are the problems with roots, you might be asking? Well, if you have root intrusion coming in, roots are very strong, so they can destroy concrete relatively easily. So if you have roots coming in through the sidewalls or even through the lids, what can happen is they can start to expand and move the concrete, which can compromise the structural integrity of the system. The main concern though with roots is once those roots start coming in there, you run a higher and higher risk of those roots working their way into a pipe and causing a clog. Now, it's not the end of the world to deal with a clog, but because they've built a structure over top of this tank, anytime they go to fix whatever might be happening, it immediately increases the difficulty and how much more effort they're gonna have to put into it, especially because of the placement of that pipe. So when you're looking in that little access panel that they've created on the floor, we're gonna be looking at our terracotta cleanout. Now, the inlet line is about 2 inches behind where that cleanout looks down. So traditionally, most septic systems, when they have a cleanout on the front, that lid will be right over top of the inlet pipe, so if something gets stuck, you can dislodge whatever it is. Every now and again on these older homes, they wouldn't do that. And then that can kind of create some issues. So in a minute, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in the house, open up the sewer line, toss the camera through the sewer just to see if everything's working good, especially because of where the sewer line's going underneath. If it's not looking good, it's not gonna be as fun to get that dealt with. So let's go ahead, pop open the lid in the home, see what we find. So if we're looking here, we'll see our sewer stack. So we have all of our sewer lines. They all converge in one point. And thank goodness they have a nice new PVC lid. Much better than trying to fight with the old brass one that would have been on there. So because we have this lid off, now we're gonna go ahead and take that camera and toss it through the pipe because we wanna see what's going on. Now, I recommend having your sewer line looked at regularly, especially if you start having some issues like clogs more often. If they keep happening, usually that means something's causing them, right? So if you have a belly in the line, roots, maybe even cast iron piping, this one more than likely is cast iron pipe, you have more texture, so it can create some room for stuff to get clogged up in there. So you want to make sure you get it looked at every 5 or 10 years. If you're buying a house, it's very important to make sure you get that looked at before you make that investment, because for all you know, you move in 6 months later, guess what? Now you got a clog, and that's no fun. So we're gonna toss the camera through real quick, and I'll see you on the other side. The sewer line for this one actually looks pretty good, right? We ran the camera all the way from the house to the tank, cast iron pipe, didn't see anything crazy. No bellies, no blockages, no roots. Definitely what we want to see, especially with that patio over it. So now we had to look at the septic system's absorption system. And based off the county records, there's 2 parts, right? Sometimes you have a mix of old and new. And in this particular circumstance, we have the old dry well, which is still in place, right? We've discussed dry wells previously, but basically what it is just a big pit in the ground with dry stack cinder block and stone on the outside. And basically, as you run water into the tank, the water will then spill over into the pit and then work its way into the surrounding soil. Now, we don't really use those very much anymore, but you'll still find them from time to time. In the 90s, they went ahead and they put a trench right off the back of that. So basically, that acts as the overflow for whenever this pit decides it wants to fail. So how the system currently is configured is you have your tank, pit, drain field. And it'll work in that order. So as you flush your toilet, the water will go to the tank, solids will fall out of suspension, heavy stuff will stay there, and then the water will go off and into the pit. Now, in the 90s, presumably the pit failed, which is why they put in the drain field. If you have the pit on a vacant home or older people living here, they're not using it as much, a lot of times that pit will actually recover. And by recover, I mean it will lose some of the water in the pit itself. So as you run water, you should see, does it rise, does it stay where it's at, or does it rise up and overflow into the trench? The concept of running systems in series is not super prevalent anymore. This was kind of one of those things you would see usually before 2010. Nowadays, we will generally put a distribution box or a bolt-on valve to separate the 2 systems entirely rather than working off of one to the other. The reason why we don't really do things in series anymore is because by giving that dry well time of not having water, it will recover some life. So if you use the new trench, what'll happen is the 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, however long it takes for that trench to fail, you've given that amount of time for the pit to recover. And in theory, you should be able to bounce between the 2. So if you don't have a separation between the 2, what'll happen is that pit just consistently stays wet and wet and wet until eventually it fails, and then the drain field gets over wet and fails, and then now you got to deal with both of these at the same time versus just going between the 2. So that's why you don't really see that super much anymore. But the way that we want to look at this is, what is the soil doing? Is it dry? And then when we put water into it, what happens? Does it drain correctly? Does it back up on us? Maybe the ground gets saturated. Something might be going on. So we got to run some water, see what it does, and I'll be back with you in a few minutes. So we ran some water. Everything looked like it was flowing the way that it's supposed to flow, and that's the most important thing whenever it comes to a septic system is when you put water in, the water gets out, doesn't come back to you, and doesn't go up to the surface. That's where you can run into some problems, and nobody wants that at all. So again, in summary, what we have today is a tank, pretty old, underneath of a porch structure thing. Definitely not what we want to see, but yeah, it's working, right? Now, you need to be very careful with stuff like that. As we've discussed a moment ago, as long as you know you're going to be replacing everything or ripping all of that out, should you have to repair anything, yeah, that's a risk you're willing to take. The dry well looked fine. The drain field looked fine. Everything's flowing the way it's supposed to. So I think that they're in pretty good shape, minus the concerns, right? I always recommend having a system looked at every 5 or 10 years. Get your system pumped out every few years, and then you'll be in good shape. The 5 or 10 year inspection, that's usually what I'm talking about for more of like a more thorough look through to see, like, is there anything wrong or on the verge of going wrong? And it'll be a lot more involved than a regular pumping. In our area, when the guy pumps out the tank, they'll suck all the stuff out, and then they'll look to see, like, you know, how full is the dry well? Are the baffles in the septic tank looking good? Is anything coming back at them when they pump out the tank? Simple stuff. But they're not really looking, what's the stone look like? They're not normally measuring the amount of liquid in the tank prior to arrival. They just kind of look at it, toss the hose in, go from there. But I think this is fun. If you gained any value out of this, if you found this informative in any way, hit that like button, hit subscribe. I have more videos posted every day on the world of well and septic, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.